Hey everyone, Mrs. Edstrom here. Welcome. We are taking some notes and we're going to talk today about how to find slope. So I know it's been maybe a little while, but go ahead and take a moment to set up your notebook page. Remember, we have our two columns for taking notes and writing any questions. This is a great place to use to ask any questions that you might have while we're taking notes, so that when we're done with the video, we can ask those questions to your teacher and get some answers right away. Don't forget to fill out today's date, and our title today is Finding Slope. So take a moment to get that set up. Alrighty, so what we are going to talk about today is we're going to take a look. I'm going to start off with these two graphs, so you don't need to write this down. Just take a look here. So here's two graphs, graph A and graph B. At this point in time, there's two things that you can do based on our lessons from last week. Number one, we can identify that both of these graphs are positive in their slope. So we can see that the line's increasing on both of these. You should also be able to identify that graph A over here is steeper than graph B. So we can see it is increasing at a quicker rate than B is. So we know that it is steeper. Now our next question is, how do we measure the slopes to know the difference? What do you think? How can we measure the slopes so that we know the difference? Awesome, I'm excited, and I'm sure Miss Medling is as well, to read those answers. We're gonna move on to talk about this and kind of come up with how we measure. So in this top of your notes section, we're gonna write that question. How do I measure? How do I measure the slope? Because this is really the big question that we're gonna be answering during our notes. So when you have this question in the future, you can come back to your note page and read what we're about to write and have that help you out. So before we get into actually finding the slope, we got to remember what slope means. So we talked about this last week, and I want to make sure we have it written in our notes somewhere. So slope, it is a number that describes both. So it's going to describe two things. It's going to describe the direction and steepness. Of the line. So take a moment, make sure you have that definition written down. The slope is a number that describes both the direction and the steepness of the line. So two things. The first thing that it describes is the direction. And you can write this in a different way if you want to. If you want to write a whole other sentence, I'm going to kind of do a little arrow chart here. So it is going to describe both the direction, which means when it is increasing, we know that it's positive. If it's decreasing, we know that it is negative slope. And if it's constant, it's not really changing, that's when we have a zero slope. So we can identify right away from looking at it the direction of the slope, that positive, negative, constant, or zero nature. And then the second thing it describes is that steepness, and we talked a little bit about what steepness means. And the steepness really means how quickly or slowly, right, kind of the same thing, how quickly or slowly the line increases or decreases. So if we're talking about this, the steepness, we want to know how quickly the line, quickly or slowly the line's either increasing or decreasing. So the steepness of the line can change by increasing less, or increasing more, or decreasing less, or decreasing more. We can kind of change that as we think about it. So if that's what the steepness tells us, we already know how to identify if something is steeper. Now what we want to do is we need to be able to measure it. So when we go to measure the slope, we want to know how far up or down the line moves over a set amount is kind of one way we want to talk about it. How far up it goes versus how far over it goes. So one way to write this in words, if you want a word definition, is that we need to find how far up or down the line moves over a set amount. So there's kind of some words, maybe you're still like, what does that mean? And that's okay, that's what we're about to talk about. Let me give you a picture of what this means. So when we draw graphs here, we're gonna draw as best of a straight line up and down as we can, right? Our notes are just an example to help us out, so we might not have perfect graphs. Here's my X and Y. If I have a line that looks like this, and I haven't given any numbers to this yet, if I have a graph that looks like this, when I talk about finding that slope, we want to know how far up or down, right? Up, or if we're talking about starting from over here down, the line moves over a set amount. So we're going to kind of make these triangles to see how far up we're going over that set amount. And the way that we write this, we have a fraction that we write. Because you'll see we have two things we want to know. We want to know how far up and we want to know how far over. So we have two things we want to know. So when we go to find slope, we can write slope as a fraction. And we're going to write that fraction as the rise. Which direction would the rise be? Yeah, the rise will be the up and down direction, right? That's what this says right here, how far up or down. Over, in our fraction, we're going to say over the run. So if rise is up and down, which way is the run? Yeah, the run is the left to right value. So it's the up and down, the amount of up and down, over a set amount of that x value, how far over we're going to go. Let's take a look at an example problem, a couple example problems here. So we're going to make some graphs. You're going to just do the best you can, remember. So we're going to start with our y-axis. Try to make as straight of a line as possible. If you have a straight edge or even just like a pad of sticky notes that you can draw a straight line on, that will be helpful. And we have our x-axis. And I'm going to make lines every so often there. We're going to count 1, 2, 3. I'm going to try to make them as even as possible. There's 1, 2, 3. I also have the negatives. I'm only going to label the positives because I know that if I'm counting by ones, that this would be the opposite, -1, -2. And let's say that this is my line. I'm going to put a point at 3, 2, and at 0, 0, and I'm going to try to connect those. I really ought to be using a straight edge here. There's my line. When I go to find the slope, first I'm looking at this, and I can see that it is positive. I can see that my slope is moving in the upward direction, so I know it's positive. Then I need to look at the rise. The rise is going to be up 1, 2 to get to this other point. So my rise is going to be equal to 2. And I'm putting this over the run. I'm going over 1, 2, 3. So this was a rise of 2, a run of 3. And then the best part about slope is we just get to leave it as that. I said it was positive because it's increasing. And it's a rise of 2 over the run of 3. So my slope is 2/3. I'm just gonna keep it as a fraction. Let's try one more here, and then you're gonna do some practice problems. So again, here's my graph. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Make sure your graph looks like that. And then I'm going to put a point here at 0, 3. And then I'm going to put a point down here at, let's do 1, 1. There's the line that I'm given. If I'm trying to do my slope, I'm doing the rise. Down 1, down 2. That means my rise is 2. Over the run. My run is over 1. Now there's one more thing. What should we have started with? We found the steepness, but we also need to check on the direction. Is this line increasing or decreasing? It is decreasing, which means that this is a negative slope. So I have a negative slope, -2 over 1. Go ahead and take a look at that first practice problem there. Alrighty, here is this first one, what you should have gotten for that one. If we are starting at this first point here, we have a rise of 1, 2, 3 over a run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can see that my line is increasing, so I have a slope of 3/7. Take a look at our next practice problem. Alrighty, so at first glance at this one, I notice that it's decreasing. So that means my slope is negative. And then I'm just counting the rise, the up or down, 1, 2, 3, 4, over the run, 1, 2, 3. So I have -4/3. We leave it as a fraction. Try out this last problem. And here's your answer. Go ahead and check that out. Like the last one, it's negative. We have a rise of 6 and a run of 2. Remember, we do want to be reducing our fractions. So 6/2 is the same as 3/1, and it's still negative. So we want to make sure every single time we're looking at these problems, we identify positive or negative, the rise, over the run, and we write it as a fraction.